Should you stay or should you go? And is it really feasible to leave the Apple ecosystem? We have some differing opinions for you to consider. ZD writers Jason Cipriani and Jason Perlow present two different sides of this issue. While software is something to keep in mind, hardware is where the dollars really add up when it comes to making a change. Jason Cipriani thinks it's possible to switch by investing in Google.
What you would want to do is probably go with a Pixel 3 or a Pixel 3 XL for your phone. A Chromebook would be Pixel Book. As far as the smartwatch goes, the Fossil Sport is widely considered to be the best Wear OS smartwatch right now. And Wear OS has a ton of issues, but it is Google's software running on hardware developed by Fossil. And Google recently just purchased some of Fossil's proprietary hardware business, as well as, they're integrating more there. So we may really see a Pixel Watch come out of Fossil's integration with Google. So we have the phone, the computer, and a watch covered now. But for earbuds, I'm not going to recommend going with Google's Pixel Buds. They're just not that great. We recently talked about Samsung's Galaxy Buds. Those are designed, even though for Samsung devices, they're designed with Android users in mind. So I would recommend going with that. But as far as smart home stuff goes, which is also part of that ecosystem, we're looking at Google Home Speaker, Google Home Mini, Google Home Max. As far as smart home integration, Google has the Google Home Hub, which is the little 7-inch smart display that controls all of your smart home devices with either touch or voice. And then the last bit of the puzzle, I think, is TV streaming, which you have Chromecast devices or Android TV boxes. So there's a lot of hardware there. It's not all meshed together very well, I think, in the sales pitch of it. But when you look at the broader picture, I think there's plenty there to be well developed into Google's ecosystem, as much as you would on Apple's ecosystem with all of their products across various categories.
Jason Perlow, on the other hand, says leaving Apple means your wallet's taking a big hit, and piecemealing products may be tougher than one would think.
Well, I mean, I'm someone who has spent a lot of time in both ecosystems, right? So it's easy for me to jump back and forth, but for your average end user, that's not necessarily the case. I've purchased personally an iPhone, an iPad, an Apple Watch, and I've recently been issued a Macintosh laptop for work. So that's a rather large component of stuff. Now, some people may also have bought Apple TVs. They might have bought Apple iHome smart speakers, although those are less popular. So there's quite a few pieces of kit that you would have to possibly replace if you decided to completely leave the Apple ecosystem. Now, you can partially leave it. I mean, you could have a Mac and still have an Android-based smartphone. There's kind of less options in the tablet area. You could obviously move to a Microsoft-based Surface device or something similar from one of their partners. But when the thing is that there really isn't a complete set of stuff if you leave Apple, right? You're going to have to mix and match between vendors. So you're going to have potentially various different types of Android smartphones, which all are a little bit different depending on who you buy them from, whether it's Samsung or it's from Google or from LG or it's from Motorola or Lenovo or somebody else. Then you've got your laptop ecosystem, which is going to be from, predominantly Windows-based, because you can't get Macintosh clones, obviously. Then you have Google's own Chromebooks, which really aren't full function laptops. They're essentially web browsers that can run a few Android applications. So it's not the same cohesive, everything works the way you expect it to be type of ecosystem, because for starters, the two other big players, Microsoft and Google, don't really get along with each other to begin with. They don't, Microsoft tries to interoperate with Google's platforms as much as possible, but Google doesn't really return that favor. So that's part of it. So yeah, you can exist, no problem, but you're not necessarily going to get the same functionality.
Apple recently announced some big additions to its lineup of services, Apple Card being one of the offerings that may make it more difficult to cut the cord.
Obviously, financial services is something that's very basic to society. So if Apple can enable that and make that easier to the end user, I think they're going to be very successful with it. But they're also branching into things also like television. Now, Apple really hasn't demonstrated the value of their TV shows relative to Netflix or Disney or any of the others, but I suspect that they're going to be investing a lot of money in buying properties and having certain shows that people are not going to want to miss on their platform. Now, arguably, they're going to be adding Apple TV to third-party systems to make it more attractive. They have also a gaming service now that they're introducing, Apple Arcade. I believe it's going to be for $10 a month that they're going to provide to gamers, and gamers is a huge community. Apple News Plus for $10 a month gets you lots of magazines and news content. So I think it's that bundling, it's that value add that brings the value.
On the flip side, Jason Cipriani is convinced Google services stack up nicely.
They made their bread and butter off of services with search and then eventually Gmail and all of that. And they've kind of springboarded from that into things like Google Docs and Google Drive, Google Photos. You have Google Play Music. There's plenty of services there that line up pretty well with what Apple has offered. And in some areas, you may consider it that they do a little bit better job as well, as long as you're comfortable giving up a little bit of information along the way. You know, for stuff like Google Assistant, being able to call and make reservations on your behalf, or Google Duplex at a restaurant, or get flight information or package tracking info in Google Assistant just based off of what's in your Gmail inbox. There's the one area I would say that the ecosystem for Google kind of starts to crumble, or at least crack, not crumble, is messaging. You know, Apple users love iMessage, right? It's this very sticky service that Apple offers that makes it really hard for people to justify leaving Apple's ecosystem, myself included. It's really hard to envision not having iMessage because it works across all of your devices. And right now, Google doesn't really have anything like that. I mean, they've messed with Hangouts, Allo, Google Voice, all these other services. And so right now, I think the biggest thing they have going for them is just text messaging. And it's horrible that that's what their messaging service is, but they are working on RCS messaging and standardizing that across all carriers.
So if you're loyal to Apple but looking to shake things up a little bit, there's a great deal to consider. For much more on Jason Cipriani and Jason Perlow's take on this issue, you'll find their full articles and much more on ZDNet.